Welcome back to Studio Life, everybody. Today we're looking at something that's not very new, but I've only just discovered it and I thought it'd be interesting to have a look. We don't always look at new plugins. It's good to look at older ones sometimes. So today we're looking at something from Overloud Gems and it's the Tapedesk. Let's find out. Is it? Tape emulators, they're interesting because for years, decades even, people were trying to get away from the awkwardness and the sound of tape to some extent. I remember when I first worked on a Pro Tools system many decades ago, being blown away by the silent passages in a piece of music being genuinely silent. It was a real eye-opener, or ear-opener, I guess. When I first heard that, and I was totally drawn into that. I loved it, working purely digital for a long time. What a great thing. Slowly people started drifting back towards thinking, miss all that lovely old analog stuff. So it started off with valve processors and eventually it's ended up in plugins that emulate the sound of tape. Now I understand it, tape did have a lot of cool things going for it. The saturation you could get excuse me, from drums, anything you pushed into it, but specifically drums, the transients rolled off beautifully with a bit of tape saturation. And tape compression, it's not something you can do digitally. Obviously, we can sort of approximate it using plugins. And obviously, these days, people run hybrid studios like this one, where you can put some analog back into your digital, which is also a nice way to do things. But a plugin that emulates tape is always been popular, and they've been around for a bit. This one came out quite a while ago now. It might have been 2017 or 2018 when it first came out, but this is the Overloud Gems Tapedesk, and it's slightly more interesting than some of them in that it not only emulates the sound of tape, but it also emulates the sound of that tape going back through the console. I think that's really important. I remember when, was it IK Multimedia, was it their Sunset Reverb thing they did, when they basically not only emulated the sound of famous reverbs, but also of those reverbs going through the desk in the studio they were captured in. It's an important part of the sound, you know, it just is. So I think this is clever. So what they're basically doing is they're emulating the sound of a 24-track tape machine going through 3 famous desks. Why not? And you basically get the choice between an SSL 4000, you get one of them's a Neve and one of them's a Trident. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, let's have a look. So as you can see, it's got the usual big tape really thing in the middle. Really thing. And you can click on that and decide whether you want it animated or not. You can decide on that based on your CPU usage at the time. Maybe it's a bit too much to have it going around all the time, but it looks nice, so why not? Up the top here, we've got the bypass button. We've got a bunch of presets, ABs, all that kind of stuff. You've got a menu on the right where you can set the scaling and all that kind of thing, and some preferences for calibrating it. Kind of important to calibrate it right because you're using it generally on the master bus. This left-hand side, this is the basically where you drive into the tape, and it gives you a couple of different options. So you've got a VU meter, which can also be a PPM meter. You've then got a trim control. So this is sort of like a gain control, but not quite. Trim is slightly different. And you can decide whether, if you put the mic pre button on, then you're getting the transformer sound of that desk. If you don't, then you're not. And then the tolerances, that is a bit like TMT, you know, it's making it sound slightly different between different versions, you know, of left and right, which, you know, sometimes that's cool, sometimes it gets on your nerves. Up to you to try it out. At the other end, we've got the output fader. We've got another VU or PPM. We've got an output fader this time. You can turn things on and off there at that point, the console side of things, and this is where you choose the consoles between the SSL, the Neve and the Trident. The middle section here, this is the tape controls. So you have a record level, which is basically your input to tape. The hotter that is, the more saturation and more tape compression you're going to get. It can be linked, which is generally a good way to run it, to the playback level. So the more you drive in, the playback level will drop off. You can really back off the input and then the playback will go up. it sounds great. You see at the demo at the end, when I really start pushing in, you start to get that real tape saturation sound, which can sound great. Sometimes it's too much. You've got to basically choose what you're using it for. You know, maybe on some drums you want them a bit crunchy, on your vocal you don't, you know, and on the overall mix you're going to go gently, you know. That's the best way to do it. You can flip this between a VU and a PPM meter. You can look at the input or the output. You've got a power switch there for the tape bit, but doesn't turn off the desk part. You've got tape speeds of 30 inches per second. That's your high speed, top quality. If you don't really want to get too many tape artifacts, just a little bit, the kind of thing you're going to run on your master, that's where you want to go. 15, bit more regular. Maybe you want your crunchy drums done with that. 7.5, that's kind of like half speed. You don't really want to be using that unless you're going for obvious tape effects. You've then got a bias control, so you can have it set to normal or over. That will really affect the sound. You've then got a wow and flutter control. So these are all the negative sides to the tape. We were trying to get rid of wow and flutter because it just sounds awful. If you dial it all the way up, you can really hear what it's doing. It might be interesting for an effect. Sometimes you want to do this to things literally over the top obvious as an effect. But in the real world, you either want it off or set incredibly low. That's kind of it for the amount of control you've got. But flipping between having the transformers on at the input stage or off, having the bias on over or normal, pushing the right amount in or too much in, you really get a lot of control over the sound of this thing. And I think it sounded very obviously like tape. I've come across some tape emulators which you really have to push before it starts to sound anything like tape at all. This, to me, was quicker to get to sound just like tape. I really like the fact that it emulates the console sound as well. Some of them sound quite bright, some of them don't. That's a good thing. Console did sound differently, especially when you got transformers. You know, when they're on, when you're going through the mic pre's, it's going to sound different. Yeah, I like it. Downsides, I would say it's really only doing the tape simulation thing, which is, I guess, what you want it to do. But I think for the price, I'd maybe expect it to do a little more, maybe to be able to be a delay, tape delay. That would be a nice addition, or a little bit more control over EQ. But I think it looks beautiful and it sounds great. One thing I didn't mention, which I've just remembered I should probably talk about, there's no oversampling on this. And I've seen a lot of discussions online about, oh, it does too much aliasing, it kind of makes it unusable. That's not true. It's just not true. Aliasing sometimes is an issue, but a lot of the time you just can't hear it. So as far as I'm concerned, if I can't hear it, I don't think it's an issue. Now, I would only use one instance of this on the master bus if I was going to use it. I probably wouldn't use it otherwise. Maybe just the drum bus to give the drums a sound of analog tape, but I don't think I'd be using loads of instances of it. If I was, I might be a little bit more concerned about aliasing. But if I'm only going to use one instance, I'm just not concerned. There are so many plugins that have aliasing that just doesn't bother me. It's not a real world problem a lot of the time, unless you've got tons of it all building up. Then it can be. So yeah, don't let that stuff bug you. Just get on and do stuff. Price wise, it's 199 euros. That's a lot of money. I don't know Overloud very well. I reviewed the Fuse a little while ago. Love that thing. It's amazing. And I think that's a really good price. 199 euros for this seems quite expensive to me. I think it should be less than half that, really, for what this does. It does a good job, but I think it's just a bit too much money. The demo's 15 days, can't argue with that. As I say, the price is 199 euros. I think that's too much. Star rating, I'm going to go 3 stars. I think it's just a bit too much money, and I would like it to do a little bit more for that kind of money. If it was 75 quid, I wouldn't argue, I don't think, but it's just too much money, in my opinion. Anyway, it does sound fantastic. Listen to the demo at the end. I think it sounds really good on everything I tried it with. So yeah, have a listen, see what you reckon. Anyway, if you could like the video, that really helps. If you could subscribe to the channel, that massively helps. You can check out my Instagram, Mixdown Mastering, see what I get up to in this studio day in, day out. There's updates all the time. You can also check out the Studio Live website, where we've got the top 5 plugins, and there's also links to the courses on mixing and mastering and a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, I will see you next time. Enjoy the demo. Adios.
just want